There are plenty of people out there who couldn't care less, whether they're genuine asylum seekers, genuine refugees, or not. They just want everybody out. And the more unpleasant and the more inhuman you can make their treatment on the way out, the better. And those, of course, are the people that the likes of Priti Patel and Suella Braverman and honest Bob Jenrick are currently fighting over. It's your support that they want. The more vicious you are in your contemplations of these people, the more desperate you are to hear the lies about how they're all awful and that one disgusting chemical attacker is somehow emblematic of an entire cohort of people, then the more delighted you must be now to have mainstream-ish politicians fighting for your support when once it was just old Nigel Farage that acknowledged your existence. So that's just facts, okay? That's not opinion. And so are these. The last time they tried to put one of these planes into the air, staff found custody officers taking one asylum seeker from his room at the Immigration Removal Centre found him self-harming on his bed. A report said he was bleeding after making cuts to his arm using parts of a drinks can. He wouldn't stop cutting himself until officers seized his arms. He was still being treated by a nurse as he was handed over to escorts tasked with transporting him to the plane, which was waiting at the Boscombe Down military base in Wiltshire. He was put under constant supervision as part of an official suicide prevention strategy. Another asylum seeker told staff he would kill himself if he was forced to get on the flight. He was put in a waist restraint belt and physically attached to a plane seat. He started thrashing around and shouting, "No, no." Then his head was held in place by custody staff who said they needed to ensure he did not headbutt either of the escorts or injure himself. So he's sort of being held, his head is being held rigidly. He continued to scream, said an official report. And at about 10:15 that night, the officials were informed that the flight had been cancelled. At that point, he immediately stopped shouting. There's an awful lot of reports that you may not be aware of. A third man told the interpreter he didn't want to go, dropped to the floor on his knees, very distressed, staff described him as. He started to scream and hit his head against the seat in front. One of the custody officers described restraining his wrists, arms and head. And when he started biting his tongue, they applied a mandibular angle pain technique to make him release it. The Home Office guidance states that such techniques should never be used when there is an alternative, but are, quotes, justifiable if that is the only viable and practical way of dealing with a violent incident which poses an immediate risk of physical harm. A fifth passenger was guided out of a detention centre after refusing to leave. He appeared as if he may throw up, holding his stomach and bending forward. And, you know, there are more. These details were secured, I think, by a Freedom of Information request via various charities. And again, I do acknowledge the existence of people who don't care. I don't want you to think I don't know you're there. And I also acknowledge that possibly that should have had a trigger warning on it. But I don't know what's more harrowing. Those sort of stories about what we are doing to human beings, or the fact that the Prime Minister in charge of the policy can do this.
And I believe that when we get it up and running, when we get flights going off, and it's uncapped so we can send lots of people there, then people will stop coming. And you know why I know that that's going to work? It's because, as you acknowledged, it's worked with Albania.
If I said to you, I'll bet you £1,000 to a refugee charity you don't get anybody on those planes before the election, will you take that bet?
Well, I want to get the people on the planes, right? Of course I want to get the people on the planes.
£1,000.
Right, I want to get the people on the planes. I'm working incredibly hard to get the people on the planes.
Do you think that should be the priority when at the same time the ONS just predicted we could hit 73 million people who in this country, right, coming in not on boats, but coming in the normal immigration system by 2036.
So hang on, there's
most people go, well, that seems massively more problematic to me.
People talk to me a lot about illegal migration, as I'm sure they talk to you about you. It's important that we grip it, and Rwanda is one part of an overall plan that is working.
So he took the bet. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom took the bet. They shook hands on it. If you haven't seen the footage, if you've spent most of the morning under a rock, I mean that affectionately. It's everywhere. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak already saying that he was taken by surprise when he agreed to make a £1,000 bet over his Rwanda policy. He's told one interviewer he was not a betting person, but at the same time denied that it was a mistake. It's an interview with another radio station in which he's claimed he was trying to convey his absolute commitment to the policy. The problem with this for me, well, the first thing to happen is that you notice how inured you are to horror. So quite a few people are suggesting I should have issued a trigger warning, particularly for detailing the account of self-harm in those freedom of information requests published in the newspaper. And you may well be right, in which case, of course, I apologise. But how can we be living in a country where descriptions of what happens to people on these planes should be accompanied by trigger warnings in case people listening to a radio programme find them too traumatic, a position with which I have 100% sympathy, when the man who is in charge not just of this policy but of ostensibly the entire country hasn't got the wherewithal to tell a publicity-seeking opportunist on a television programme that only exists because Rupert Murdoch is bankrolling epic losses to stick his disgusting stunt where the sun don't shine. I mean, if he needs advice from me, which I would ordinarily consider unlikely, but in this occasion he clearly needs advice from someone, you say, please, Piers. That was Piers Morgan doing the interview. Please, Piers, don't try to make, if you like, capital, televisual capital, or please don't try to turn this very important issue into a crass attempt at seeking attention or attracting views. What was that about? He's not a betting man, he says. He worked for a bloody hedge fund. What do you think a hedge fund is? Oh, I'm not a betting man. Unless it's billions of pounds. I'm betting upon the economic consequences of Brexit or the international financial crisis being bad for the country that I seek to govern. I'll make a ton of money out of that. I'll make a ton of money out of betting upon the misery of the voters that I'm going to be wooing in 10 years' time. But, oh no, I'm not a betting man. Here I am shaking hands with probably the most accomplished self-publicist in the British media, who's offered me a £1,000 bet on whether or not a plane full of people self-harming is actually going to take off before the next general election, and I've bitten his arm off. But I'm not a betting man. Oh no, I'm Rishi Sunak. I made all my money betting on the markets, but I'm not a betting man. There's a level of contempt for the voter, for the public, that very few politicians reach, because they're normally clever enough to cover it up. Sunak can't help himself. It's very strange. What was that? What was that? Why did Rishi Sunak take that bet? 0345 6060 973. Because he's an idiot? Because he's callous? Because he's so eager to please that he would not have the guts to say, put your hand back in your pocket, you ridiculous human being. I'm not placing bets upon the fate of human beings. Because he's so boiled by the bigotry of the policy that he's brought in that he's forgotten which way is right and which way is wrong, which way is up and which way is down. Because he doesn't think that refugees are human beings at all. They're just chips. You know what it made me think of? It made me think of Trading Places. I don't know if you've ever seen that film. One of my all-time favourite films, which reminds me, actually, I must watch it with the children. I don't think they've seen it. It's when Eddie Murphy was in his pomp. Opening scene when he's pretending to be a disabled military veteran in the park, and the two cops pick him up. He's pretending to have had both of his legs amputated, and the two cops pick him up, and his legs obviously fall. But it's, hallelujah, I can walk. Hallelujah! It's an amazing film. But the plot pivot is two very, very wealthy city types, who no doubt would tell their friends, and perhaps even the BBC, that they're not betting men. They place a $1, I'll say that again, a $1 bet on whether or not they can swap Eddie Murphy's character, a sort of recidivist criminal, with Dan Aykroyd's character, a very waspy son of privilege who works for their firm, their investment firm. Could they swap them round and prove that nurture is more important than nature, because Eddie Murphy's character would become a hotshot city trader, and Dan Aykroyd's character, if he were to have misfortune lumped upon him from outside, would end up on his uppers in the way that Eddie Murphy is at the beginning of the film. And they place a bet on it. Two human beings who are so worthless in the eyes of these city gents. They're so worthless in the eyes of these plutocrats that they see them as mere playthings in a game that isn't even worthy of a stake of more than £1. It's £1,000 in this case for two very wealthy men. In Rishi Sunak's case, almost absurdly wealthy. Placing a bet, shaking the hand. 11:15 is the time. The lie that he's not a betting man, we can leave perhaps to Keir Starmer at PMQs tomorrow. I don't know. I've got a smear Keir for you later as well, which popped up a little later in the interview when Rishi Sunak, here's something I never thought I'd say, Rishi Sunak tries to do to Keir Starmer what Nadine Dorries once tried to do to me. I'll share that with you shortly. But here is the question. There's two questions, isn't there? There's always two questions. The first is, why did he take that bet? Analyse him, all you want, okay? Why did he take that bet? 0345 6060 973. There's no mystery about why Piers Morgan offered it. Cynical, attention-seeking publicity stunt. Why did he do the interview in the first place? Well, probably to keep Rupert Murdoch happy, which is not unique by any stretch of the imagination to Rishi Sunak or even to Conservative politicians. But why did he take that bet? 0345 6060 973. And the second question is, I had to remind myself how awful this is. I think we've become so inured now to things that would have been traffic stopping in 2015, say, when Ed Miliband, we were all being urged not to vote for Ed Miliband because there'd be total chaos. Do you remember when David Cameron urged us to do that? I mean, it's not even that long ago. It was 2019, I think, when Amber Rudd resigned over mistakes that hadn't even been made on her watch. She'd accidentally misled Parliament of a consequence of paperwork she'd been given in her department. She resigned on a point of honour. A few months later, she resigned again because she couldn't go along with Boris Johnson's lies. That's only 4-5 years ago, when a senior Conservative politician could resign on a point of principle twice in the same cycle. And now you've got a Prime Minister not having the wherewithal because he's so boxed in by this disgusting policy that he must know in his heart is disgusting and probably doomed. But because of the people to the right of him insisting that we've got to be even nastier to refugees, there he is, not having the wherewithal to say, no, listen, I'm here to answer your questions. There's a little bit of me that doesn't even want to talk about it because we're delivering the attention to the other character that he so desperately craves. But you have to talk about it, and this is what I had to remind myself of when it is the Prime Minister. When it is the Prime Minister. 0345 6060 973. Why did he take the bet? And what do you make of it? Seriously, I don't like asking this question because you normally need a little bit more direction or guidance from me. The vaguer I am, the harder it can sometimes be. But on this one, take a moment, talk me through your response to this. Tell me it's not as bad as I think it is, please, because I don't want it to be. It seems to me to be disgusting. It seems to me to be Roman. It seems to me to smack of Hunger Games type pathology. Ordinary human beings, desperate human beings, being treated like mere chips to the plutocrats, to the Prime Minister, to very wealthy men, placing bets upon the fate of desperate human beings.